Hello, everyone. Nicholas Hall again here with Graham's Foundation. I'm here with Alon Metrikin. Alon is joining me from the other side of the world, from Israel today. Alon, it's great to be with you.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and I stumbled upon the Skincubator because thank you, LinkedIn. I have many complaints of LinkedIn. I won't go into those, but one of the things that I'm grateful for is that it does do a nice job of bringing for me, raising awareness of some of the really amazing new innovations that are
Mm,
happening in the world of neonatology. And I admit that here in the U.S., it's a large market, obviously, and so we can become a bit siloed in our view and in our vision, and can maybe spending too much time thinking about or noticing the innovations here in the U.S. without recognizing some amazing innovations that are happening around the rest of the world. So um, I just would, I'd love to know. Obviously, we want to talk more about the skin incubator, but I also am curious to know what led to, just the idea and the development and where it is, and so if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself to our community of listeners, that'd be great.
yeah, well, thank you for this opportunity. With permission, I'll tell you a little bit about Skincubator. I'll channel my partner, who's a neonatologist. Then I'll tell you a little bit about
Yeah,
myself,
yeah,
just to give naive listeners some
yeah,
context. So, what we're trying to do in Skincubator is to overcome the significant barriers to immediate and prolonged skin-to-skin care, and to enable prolonged skin-to-skin care for every preterm infant, especially the high acuity babies.
yeah,
And I'll explain more during the show how we actually accomplish that.
yeah.
Now, what catalyzed this whole project was my partner was a resident in Monash in Melbourne, and he was studying the heart functionality of babies on their parents' chest. And he he came to the obvious conclusion that preterm babies do better when they're on their moms than when they're in the incubator. Their hearts function better. And he wrote this lovely article. And just before he sent it to publication, he said, Itamar, his name is Itamar Nitzan,
Yeah.
Itamar, you did a wonderful research and you didn't understand anything because the natural place for any mammal, any mammalian offspring, is to be on his mother's chest or his parents' chest. And the unnatural place, the artificial place, is to be in separation. And so we shouldn't say that their heart rate improves when they're on their moms. We should say that their heart rate deteriorates when they're separated. And that switched the whole position for him. If, together with his colleagues, he would look at a baby and say, "Oh, that's great, that baby got an hour of skin to skin care," suddenly he said, "Oh no, that baby has 23 hours of separation." And that,
Alon, I got to tell you, as a former, CPA, finance person, numbers person, it is amazing how you look at a number,
Mhm.
how it's the same number, same measure, but how you look at it, how you consider it really can transform the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I already, at this stage of the conversation, I already want to say that there is no culprit. There aren't
Yeah.
doctors or nurses that know the significance of skin to skin care and are blocking it with their bodies
Right.
for.
Right.
That's not the reality. And there
Right.
aren't parents that don't care, and even though they know, that's also not the reality. So for some reason, though, we've been in NICUs all over the world. We've traveled really, traveled to, spoken with dozens of NICUs, hundreds of nurses and parents. And in the beginning, we started, well, before we started, I'll say that that insight that I shared with you, that hour versus 23 hours kind of catalyzed this very intense interest into, well, so why can't we do it? And he and I connected quite early on in his journey. And he told me about the project, and I said, "Well, I want to drop everything and join you."
Mm.
Um, and that's how I found myself in the project. Um, my background, I'm really all over the place today. I'm jumping from one topic to the other. I'm trying to give context for everyone all at once. So my background is that for the past 14 years, I've been doing health projects and medical devices. I started out in anti-human trafficking, lobbying on that, then sexual education, and then I developed a device for sexual assault documentation that took it from an idea to hundreds of hospitals across the US and the UK and Australia working with sexual assault nurse examiners that needed a more discreet and easy to use device in that very, very fragile moment.
Yeah.
Mm,
Mm.
that was part of a company that did cervical cancer diagnostics. So naturally, I moved into that space as well. Uh,
Yeah.
I guess you could say it was quite depressing for a decade in my
Yeah.
work.
No, it's like
And
you're trying to improve the ability to assess and to analyze
Mhm.
what is it's a heavy, right? It's a very heavy traumatic situation. Yeah.
So heavy topics, but with a lot of meaning and a sense of purpose.
Mm.
And that part ended after a good decade, and that's when I connected with with my partner. And one more piece that I'll add to the story is that during that process I completed a master's in medical anthropology. And anthropology and the culture of the NICU is going to play a part. It's an actor in our story
Mm.
because I believe that it's much more impactful than what we recognize it is.
Mm.
I'll break that down in a moment. So he and I connected 4 years ago, and we decided to embark on this journey of like, can we build this device? By then, he was already a year into developing what amounted to a big box on a parent's chest, trying to trap in heat and humidity to mimic an incubator-like environment. And already successful with like 20 babies, and it was great. It didn't look that great, but it was heading somewhere.
Most prototypes tend to be, yeah, a little clanky.
Uh,
Yes.
yeah, a little clunky is understatement. We started showing it to nurses, and no one understood what we were talking about.
Mm.
Just like they said, humidity isn't a thing, heat loss isn't a thing. We don't do skin to skin care as much as you think we do. And after
Mm.
we heard that like five, seven, 10,000 times, we said, hold on, there's something going on here. And we started listening differently. We started listening to stories of not how are you doing skin to skin care, but how are you not doing skin to skin care? How are you failing gracefully in
Mm.
attempts to do skin to skin care? And
Which is not it's not an easy conversation. It's like I can imagine you're wanting to pull that information out, but they don't want to feel like they're failing their parents, their families either.
well, I guess I never thought about it, but now that you drew my attention to it, I guess I could categorize the reactions into anger, frustration that they're not, and like all of the reasons come gushing out.
Mm.
We have some form of not seeing it as a problem, like what we have going is good. And in
Yeah.
some cases, that's the case. Like you're doing a lot of skin to skin care, and that's amazing. In most cases, it's a question of definitions. It's vocabulary. Skin to skin care does not mean the same thing for all people. When
Mm.
I say skin to skin care, or if you tell me like how much skin to skin care are you doing, I'll ask you intermittent skin to skin care or prolonged skin to skin care, early skin to skin care or late stage skin to skin care,
Yeah.
skin to skin care for high acuity babies or for stable babies. These terms are wildly different in
Yeah.
practice than they are in reality. Now, I think that it's worth pausing for those not, I imagine most of your listeners are very familiar with skin to skin care, but it's worth just recognizing that the World Health Organization by now has come out with sweeping guidelines saying every
Mm.
preterm infant for from within the first 24 hours after birth for at least 8 hours each day. Um,
Wow.
and very dramatic clinical guidelines. Um, and we can have a whole conversation about why it's really tough to implement just these guidelines. That's kind of what we're trying to do. One of the reasons is that a lot of the big research that came out of skin to skin care came out of low and middle income countries, India, Africa, Brazil, some really great research coming out of Northern Europe, the States, but much, much smaller scale and on metrics that don't, quote unquote, move the needle financially for a NICU. So part of the conversations that I
Which,
find,
which, again, as a numbers person, it's just like it drives me just insane that we end up, consider we just the things that really matter and make a difference. Like we end up talking dollars and cents, and this is going to get the baby's going to get home 5 days sooner, and that's going to save you. It's just like it's
yes,
like it's the rest of this child's life. I mean, it's just like the dollars and cents long term is if you like all the extra they need in school, everything. If you're making a bit of a difference in the
yes.
outcome of that baby, you can't even quantify it, but yet we just we just have to, it's unfortunate.
Exactly. But
This
we
is
we've tried actually. We've tried.
yeah, yeah.
We have a magic number. It's big.
I imagine
It's
it is. Yeah, I imagine it is.
but part of the challenge is that even not from a commercial standpoint, but from a clinical standpoint, just the research, the big research was done in low resource countries. The small research was done in high income countries, and so the guidelines are kind of tough to make sweeping.
Yeah,
That's where we are right now, 2026. That might change within a few years. Um, Data about skin to skin care has been accumulating for the last 40 years.
yeah,
Meaning by now, I had a nurse tell me once, if one more person tells me about the benefits of skin to skin care, I'm throwing them out of the window. Like people get it.
yeah.
Um, but people are failing gracefully. Many units are not reaching the guidelines. So why? So we have those that are frustrated and it comes gushing out like immediately. We have those that are just practical, like, look, the parents are overworked, there's no maternity leave, they have 3 kids at home. It's just life. Like we'll take what we can get. Okay, that's also very realistic. In the end, we came up with a list. At first, it was over 100 barriers. We narrowed it down to 40 plus unique barriers that a family will face in the first 14 days of life. Not all of them come into play immediately, but we have like a good 40, and that's in a few categories, five,
And is
six.
that a lot? Is that covering, first through third world?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Because I've been to
There,
a few, I've been to a few NICUs, second, third world, I'm sure not nearly as many as you have, but I mean, the barriers I, they're probably fewer in some ways in second and third world, I would imagine, than they are in first world, but I'm curious to hear what you all have
well,
discovered.
firstly, I haven't been in so physically, I haven't been in so many NICUs in low-income countries. We've spoken to a lot,
Mm,
and over the next year, we're going to spend a lot of time
yeah,
in Southeast Asia, so that'll grow. We've met with a lot of staff from low-income
yeah,
countries, and but when we speak, the barriers clinically are the same. Operationally, you can think, but also, of course, there are more challenges. And of course, but I want also to emphasize a high-income NICU in Nairobi might have the same challenges as a Cedar Sinai in LA, and a low-income NICU in some, maternity desert
yeah,
county somewhere in the Midwest might have more similar barriers to like a public hospital NICU in Nairobi. So you can't really just say like, oh, that
yeah.
country and this country. Um,
No, and I'm in the Midwest, and Our twins were in a community hospital in LA. We considered transferring to Cedars-Sinai. I swear. That was definitely like that was posh. That was really, it was 20 years ago. It was really nice. We chose not to, but yeah, it can be incredibly different just one county over.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And even, one hospital over, sometimes even just one shift over. There's
Yeah.
so many variables.
Yeah.
Um, that's
Yeah.
one of the reasons why I really want to emphasize there isn't a culprit to this story. There's a
Yeah.
condition, there's a situation which
Yeah.
we as a culture or a humanity have fallen into. This culture is an assumption that we need to separate preterm babies from their parents immediately at birth, because that's basically what the technology assumes. The
Mm.
technology, the incubator was invented by a doctor, late 19th century, who got inspired by chickens. If he was living in Australia, maybe he would have gotten inspired by kangaroos. So, life is circumstantial that way. He invented the neonatal incubator. And that concept of the incubator permeated across the neonatal world. And by now, it's absolutely, it's more than gold standard. It's just, and it's critical. I'm not downplaying the incubator in no shape or form. It's just a critical piece of equipment. But all of the therapies were built, and all of the clinical workflows and all of the trainings were built around this artifact, around
Mm.
this idea around this idea that you separate the baby and treat the baby separately, and around this artifact. And if I was an alien from Mars landing for the first time on Earth, walking into a NICU, I would look at that and say, "Oh, this culture really, really like, cares about these babies," and they wouldn't even know that parents are part of the story
Right. Right.
because technologically and from an infrastructure perspective, parents aren't part of this. They're not part of the story. They're not part of the plot. Now, all of the family-centered care units in the world, and NEEDCAP, and FICARE, all of the hospitals that are implementing very, very significant measures to bring the families in are doing incredible work. So I'm not arguing that work isn't being done to bring the families in. The point I'm trying to draw attention to is that, going back to what you say, from dollars and cents, from bricks and mortar, from, there's this expression of like, what, well, just where you put your money. So NICUs are putting money into technologies that focus on very specific types of care, which are
Hmm.
critical and life-saving. So they have no choice. And the best they can offer parents, the best they can offer until now are wraps and reclining chairs
Yeah.
and some great technologies like cameras that feed in Angel Eye, NICView,
Yeah.
some other developmental technologies. So you add that to all of the constraints of, maternity leave and living away from the hospital and having other kids at home and so many complications. It really is a complex problem. Where do we fit in? Before I continue on this
Yeah.
ever-ending monologue, maybe I'll
Yeah.
take a breather and I'll let
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
respond or ask a question. I
No,
know you.
I mean no, I'm following. You got all the acronyms too, the NIDCAPs and
Uh-huh.
and all the other initiatives and family-centered care um and I know I was curious like when the idea first um began to develop and you shared like about 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. And interestingly, I connected with another innovative company in Australia that completely like unrelated is developing a catheter to improve diagnostic of babies born preterm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, totally related but unrelated. Um, and they're in Melbourne as well. Must be a lot of neonatal innovations happening there in Melbourne. Um, yeah, no, I'm tracking. So and you said the first, the skin incubator, the first device was, rather large and unattractive. So I'm uh yeah, certainly curious to
How we
yeah,
evolved.
yeah, to see how it's yeah, kind of see where yeah, where things are today.
It's very easy to um, iterate and pivot when you're doing a software startup. Try something out, write some
Yeah.
code, show a prototype. When you have a wearable device in the NICU, you have to get everything right in the first draft because if you
Mhm.
don't, you get thrown out, thrown out and like come back. Um, because there's a lot riding on anything that meets these families. Like
Yeah.
you can't really mess around and you need to be very, very intentional in every little thing that you present
Mm.
for the families and to the nurses. Nurses are measured on every little point of safety. And indeed, when we started looking at the trends, we recognized that that's a significant pain for neonatal nurses. They're being pressured to do skin to skin care on the one hand for these fragile infants that have lots of invasive lines and tubes and often invasive ventilation. And on the other hand, they're really not given a lot of tools to support the baby in that condition. From their perspective, and what a lot of nurses have been trained on, it's safer and easier for the baby to be just stationary in a box in the incubator than on this living, moving island, which is unpredictable and can fall asleep.
Yeah. They're clear of what the risks and the challenges are.
Hmm.
And if the baby is stable in the
Hmm.
incubator,
Right.
it's like, okay, yes, we know skin to skin, we know the benefits, but it's not like they don't just boom, they show up all the, everything is visible. It was all worth it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Um, so there's what you would call a front-loaded risk, and
Yeah.
then every part of the way is potentially painful for the nurses,
Right.
as in painful for the baby, and so painful for the nurses and the parents. Like they're worried about that. So transferring the baby often takes two nurses plus a respiratory therapist, and it takes several minutes, and the mom is very nervous. And by the time they get baby on the parent's chest, also dad can be very nervous, of
Yeah.
course,
Yeah.
um, and place baby on the parent's chest, and then start taping all of the lines and tubes to the parent. That's another couple of minutes.
Yeah.
Then, after 20 minutes, they often ask the parents to commit to at least 1 hour. But life happens. You need to go to the bathroom, you need something.
Yeah.
Or very often, the baby gets cold. The baby dehydrates, the baby, And so they take the baby back. And all of that fuss and hassle leaves the parent feeling quite guilty that he put his kid through that, that he put his staff, which is caring for his baby, through that. He's not going to come back for a good amount of time. Often we hear parents tell us that.
Yeah.
And so transfers are an issue, safety is an issue, and on top of all of that, environment is an issue. Like you actually do need a warm, humid environment. And there is really great research showing that preterm babies, like all of their organs, their skin is underdeveloped too. So they lose fluids very quickly.
Mm.
And some of them dehydrate, some of them just, become hypothermic, they get cold. And so maintaining a warm human environment like an incubator-like environment was also challenging. So all of these are challenges. On top of that, you want to do phototherapy, you want to do heel pricks, you have all of these other stuff going on.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier that there's so much technology that it makes it hard for a parent to find their parenthood in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so what we're trying to bring, finally, I'll get to what Skincubator
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what we're trying to bring is a technological enabler that will enable parents to express their parenthood because
Yeah.
they're a critical part of the dyad.
Yeah.
That will allow the nurses to much more freely bring babies out into skin to skin care and be relaxed when they're on skin to skin care. And to finally also give NICUs the technology to draw attention to this issue. that can allow them to concentrate on skin to skin care because it's a much broader discussion that you start having once you're investing in the technology. Suddenly, you start talking about training, you start talking about protocols, you start asking, how do we actually get the parents? How can we support them? They have a lot of stuff going on, but maybe we can do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And so we are trying to bring in this missing piece of the puzzle that makes the invisible visible, basically. That's on the cultural level before I started solving all of the safety issues. Um, we by now have a very much more mature device already, multiple iterations on every little piece. And we have several layers to the product. I'll be able in a moment to share. I don't know if this
Yeah.
is also on video or we can reference.
Normally we keep these as audio because most people
Yeah,
just
yeah,
want
yeah.
to listen. But I noticed you're going to have the ability to share, so I think we'll do this one as video as well because we're gonna,
Cool.
for those that can, have the chance to watch our
Yeah.
conversation.
Um, So, so while I bring up my trusty deck, so where we are right now, we're already after multiple babies. By now, we've cared for 46 infants, either born before 28 weeks or between 28 and 32 weeks. So before 28 weeks, after 72 hours from birth, between 28 to 32 hours, immediately from the first day of life. We're seeing that without doing anything, simply by utilizing the device, we're doubling the amount of skin to skin care time with the parents that we're working with. We're seeing babies that were previously contraindicated to skin care, like babies with arterial catheters or invasively ventilated babies,
Yeah.
go into very, very long sessions. We're
Hmm.
seeing mothers and fathers achieve 6, 7, 8 hours a day of skin to skin care.
Wow. Wow.
Um, and nurses are doing heel pricks, phototherapy, all of the magic suddenly occurs. So the way we do that is really with a device. And before I get into the device, we're not trying to replace traditional skin to skin care. I'm going to say that again. We're not trying to replace traditional skin to skin care for a few reasons. Firstly, it's just a wonderful experience. And for babies that can tolerate traditional skin to skin care, it's easier to have a wrap with a baby inside, and it's a calm experience. No reason to touch that. We're trying to bridge between the moment of birth and the moment that the baby is stable. In that unstable period, high acuity first days, it's tough for nurses and for parents to deliver prolonged skin to skin care. And it just takes one reason to stop a session. Like it's not that it accumulates and then they decide, oh, we've had enough for today. Any one reason will stop a session, and that's why it's really, really hard in the beginning. Once the baby is more stable, it's easier. But by then, if the parents didn't have the opportunity to do a lot of skin to skin care for the first week, the second week, sometimes even third or fourth, it's hard for them to find their place again. Suddenly they need to show up. Suddenly they're being told that they need to do hours and hours of skin to skin care, and they need to be in the NICU all day and be ready for discharge. And suddenly just the parent needs to be something that they weren't trained to again. So first they weren't trained to be a NICU parent, and then they weren't trained or to be, a prolonged NICU stay, and then
Yeah.
to be a
Yeah.
NICU parent at home. So again and again, it's just really challenging for the parents. Um, our what we're seeing is that by working with the parents and the staff from birth and allowing everyone to come together, it's a much more natural experience. Well, of course, the parent is going to do a lot of skin to skin care in week 3 because they've been doing it for already 2 weeks.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So, so all of that kind of relates um, to what I'm about to share with you. Um, maybe I guess I'll go straight ahead to the device. This is how the device looks like right now. So those that are just listening, it has several layers. There's a pad that rolls under the baby. This really you have to see because it's hard to imagine.
Yeah.
It rolls under the baby without chafing their skin, and it's a very, very thin pad that took quite a long time to develop. And once it rolls under the baby, it allows us to move the baby over to the parent, and then it opens up, and we're in complete skin-to-skin care. Above that, we have a second layer that anchors all of the invasive lines and tubes. And above that, we have a transparent cover that traps in the heat and humidity. The device is non-electric, it's biocompatible, of course, with non-toxic materials that have been tested extensively, and are all also well known in medical devices. And basically, it allows for access for the nurses to access the baby during skin to skin care. We know that skin to skin care reduces pain during procedures, so they can do, a heel prick or any other taking blood or any other test they need to do. They can also see a baby, which was causing for some nurses quite some distress not to be able to see an invasive line that might get dislocated and cause bleeding. They can see the baby. We also have a darkening cover, so when you don't need to see the baby, you just can, afford some quiet, optical quiet. And we have openings for the parents, of course. I mean, on top of them being in complete skin-to-skin care, put the hands open to touch, kiss, etc. So to very much keep the multi-sensory experience. And And so again, this is for kind of this very high acuity early stage. What you're seeing is my partner in the picture doing functional echocardiography on a baby, and we've already done multiple various procedures. And the smallest we've cared for already is 24 weeks, 580 grams. So
Yeah.
this picture was after 6 hours of skin to skin care on the mom. And it's very easy to take breaks. So, mom can do an hour or two or even 20 minutes and she needs to go to the bathroom and dad shows up or the partner or grandma or any number of significant others that can take part. We're already seeing that this discussion on who can do skin to skin care is also a big question that varies in different NICUs. And it's an interesting discussion. Here's another 25-weeker invasively ventilated after 5 hours of skin to skin care. And that was for the whole week. The mom was with the baby every day. You're seeing now just a video of mom with the baby on her chest with the device. This is less than 48 hours after cesarean. So we've tested it with all sorts of body types of parents and post-cesarean and enlarged breasts after birth and
Yeah.
a lot of that. And very easy to clean the device in between sessions. I didn't, not only because this is a podcast and the medium is quite hard to convey the
Yeah.
device. Also, the story we're trying to tell is bigger than or at least I hope, is bigger than just did we choose this color for the
Yeah.
cushion or that cover,
Yeah.
which is it draws a lot of attention. The device is very visual. But I think what I really want to talk about is how are we supporting the parents in all of the different ways, in all of the technologies available to us to allow for this dyad to flourish after birth and to express itself in the most full way. And that's a really hard and complicated question
Yeah.
that not only we will answer. Hopefully, we're part of that solution. And you can see here a dad with a 26-week-old baby, and some solutions for parents that I'm very curious to run by you afterwards. And I think I'll share with you a link to this video that you're seeing here that just shows the whole flow of the device, how it's
Yeah.
set up.
You're getting to my, I was curious about that, the kind of the workflow of it. Yeah.
Um, So you can see the whole setup of, anchoring the lines and the tubes. And this is going to be quite a long, like it's 3, 4 minutes. So I don't want to
Well,
take up.
but you're allowing the nurses to make the transfer while the baby is in a stable position, right?
Yes,
It's in the
yes,
position, and I'm seeing here that it appears to be incubator agnostic, is what,
absolutely. Yeah,
right?
absolutely. We just happen to show this, on a giraffe, but
Yeah,
we've tested it by now with all of the different incubator brands, with the
yeah,
Drakers and the Adams and you name it. So we're anchoring the lines, the tubes, then anchoring the baby. The baby is just lying on the incubator, on the mat, on the incubator
yeah,
mat.
right.
And now you're going to see this, for the test, an intubated baby, and now we're rolling under the baby. And so we do this without moving the baby and without chafing their fragile skin. And now you can see the
Right.
mat kind of showing up under the baby. So very slowly and gradually. And in a moment, we'll show it just with just one nurse. So it's very, very easy to do.
I guess one thing I'm curious is, um, did did parents want to ever kind of go from one parent to another? Uh,
hmm Yeah, absolutely. That happens quite a lot, and it's one of our personal favorites because that's kind of what we imagined when we wanted to enable that, and it happens quite often. And it simplifies the transfers as well because we're not one of the things that happens in a transfer is what you called cold stress, that like coming out of a warm shower on a cold day. You're like, "Ugh." And that for a 600-gram baby is quite significant. And so we noticed that in the beginning of the development, and that's what made us very curious about this idea of transfers and can we improve on that somehow? And and now you can see, the baby was transferred in a warm, humid environment over the parent and then opens up. Now, I encounter some nurses and parents that see the flow and they say, you know what, it's unnecessary. We can do this just fine in a standing transfer and we're okay. And that's great. As long as the parents and babies are getting maximum skin to skin care, then that's excellent. Um, and from experience, I see that a lot of units don't accomplish that and struggle for all sorts of reasons. You saw here some nurses try out um, different elements of caring for the baby during skin to skin care, and now you're seeing the end of a session just rolling back. Um,
hmm. And so I think you mentioned that you're in the process of um, introducing the Skincubator to
yeah.
a number of neonatal intensive care units.
Absolutely. So we'll be starting a study in Houston this summer. We're really excited about that. And we have an ongoing study in Israel. Soon we'll have a study in Germany, fingers crossed, and a couple of other countries in Europe. We'll be getting the CE mark, the European equivalent of FDA, just in 2, 3 months. We've been granted breakthrough device designation from the FDA just a few months ago, recognizing that we're dealing with a life-threatening condition and a novel approach without alternatives in the market, and it's in the best interest to get it to patients. So that was a really wonderful signal from the regulatory agency that this is a problem worth discussing. And and so this study in the US that we'll have and the other studies will be supporting the submission to the US, and that's where we are right now. I can go on and on. I feel
Yes.
like I've been monologuing for the better part of an hour.
No, it's exciting. I mean, it looks like you could really move the dial. What in the with the vision, yeah, feel free to if there's any other particular slides that you wanted to
I think just one
share.
more, yeah, one more. We just had a publication come out about parental acceptance of Skincubator, and we're seeing that parents really felt very positive about it. And most notably, their ability to do many hours, 8 to 12 hours a day, and to sleep, which is a huge issue in NICUs. They just don't allow it. And that's one of the barriers to a lot of skin to skin care because parents are absolutely exhausted and they need to
Yeah.
sleep. And once you make it safe, then that does become a possibility. Uh, so that's kind of the and then I just have lots of baby pictures, which I like love
Yeah.
sharing, but not right now because we're on a podcast.
And you also have an easy to remember name.
It's very people either love it or they hate it, but we love it, so we'll stick with it.
I get it. I mean, I get it.
Yeah.
Like I said, easy to remember, easy to spell. So, easy to search for. So
Yeah.
that's good.
Uh-huh.
Well, this is exciting. Um, and so what if all goes relatively well and you don't have any hiccups or surprises, what is
Mhm.
what's the next 12 to 18 months? What is that?
Hmm.
What do you
So
see?
I guess we'll be kind of consistently growing our presence in NICUs in Europe, in Israel, and Australia, India, South Africa, so several other places. We'll be doing clinical work in the US, and there, working towards the FDA submission, and then submit and start working all over. While we are a for profit. We're a commercial driven
Yeah.
company.
Yep.
I've always invested myself in what you call fourth sector. So companies that are for profit but with a social mission. So
Yeah.
I feel that there's a lot of alignment here. Um, Actually, I have a question for you.
Sure.
I've been talking so much about the parental experience and parents in the NICU, and almost feel like I'm mansplaining how parents in the NICU should feel. If if there's one thing that we should pay attention to when we're communicating with parents,
Mm,
what would you say around skin to skin care? What would you say that is?
hmm. Gosh, that's a good question. Um, the the barriers that you're talking about. I mean,
Mm,
the parents have to be able to get there.
mm,
And
yeah,
and you talked about some of the barriers of um, not having leave, so not being
yeah,
able to physically be there,
yeah.
or yeah, other children at home. I guess, recognize that those barriers are real.
Mm,
But like you talked about the ability for that a parent could actually sleep.
mm,
Um, like to know that there's the baby is still getting a benefit and
mm,
could I actually sleep while being able to provide skin to skin is really quite powerful.
mm,
Um, so I think, there's organizations like Graham's who we have hundreds and thousands of parents that
mm.
have been through this journey. Um, and so, um, continuing to collect, you're gonna be able to, there's the sales cycle that which is going to
Mm,
be the hospitals, right? And that there's a journey to introducing and getting hospitals, and there's metrics and there's all that stuff. But ultimately, the success will lie in parents really adopting and wanting to use it. And but we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what to expect.
Yeah.
So if a parent goes into a neonatal intensive care unit and that is part of the experience, they will assume that that's part of what there is to expect.
Mm.
Because they won't know any different. Um, and so I think that, that parents can be a powerful voice and a powerful supporter, but they only know the experience that they know.
Mm. How do you think parents would feel if they were told that, like in the PICU, if like you have a 3-year-old that shows up, then immediately they're told you always have to have someone here with the baby.
Yeah,
Doesn't matter who, but you always have to have someone here.
right.
And by the way, that person can do skin to skin care whenever they're. How do you think parents would react to that suddenly new and different reality that
It
you
would,
have to be present in the NICU at all times? Not as a, that's kind of, and you need to do skin to skin care. It's good. We debate whether that how that would land with parents. So charged.
oh man, again, I'm from a US centric point of view, and it
Mhm.
would. Um, I didn't, I was fortunate. I was, I had a, um, I had a hybrid job before there were hybrid jobs.
Uh-huh.
I was able to be at the NICU 119 days with my daughter every day.
Wow.
So my manager was like, you don't have to travel. You can just, so I was able to just have my laptop. I was able to be in there every day. Um, I think if you could, thing is, it would be awesome if there were, if like, if there, if, if the doctors and if the system had more levers
Hmm.
to be able to push, a letter from your neonatologist to your employer. Like, if there were,
Really?
getting the doctor's letter that we need the parent here, and we recognize that there could be a barrier for these particular reasons, but this is critical, right? That doesn't
That's
happen.
such a beautiful,
That
that's such a
doesn't happen
beautiful
right
low-hanging
now.
fruit. Really?
No, I never, no, there's no, like parents send a letter to the school.
Yeah.
My kid's sick today. Not,
Yeah, yeah,
no,
yeah.
there is, I'm not aware. I mean, if it exists somewhere, I'd love to hear about it, but I'm not aware of any sort of communication from a neonatal intensive care unit to the parents, you name it, right? The outside world
Right.
helping to, because it's difficult I mean, I was comfortable saying it, but a lot of parents are not, they got so many concerns on their plate, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so, and for a parent, it's like, well, am I, am I supposed to be grateful for this situation? But I
Mm.
don't feel grateful because I feel overwhelmed or, you know, can't afford this. We can't. I mean, there's all these various circumstances, and most people, the reality is, paycheck to paycheck or close to that. And so you just don't know their particular situation. As I understand it, what you're talking about with the skin incubator are what you proposing is the importance is in the first,
Well, yeah, in the first critical days,
yeah,
critical in the sense of intensive care, critical care, and also
yeah,
critical because those are the most fragile days.
yeah,
And so getting getting babies in skin-to-skin care, prolonged skin-to-skin care, is known to stabilize them and get them into the low or low level step down um, unit. But that's the theory that by stabilizing them, they get there quick, and that makes everyone's life easy. Um,
Like
so
I think that there's probably a higher likelihood of that being able to happen if the parents and if they see, okay, that's a long period of time, it would be really difficult, but for the first 7 days or for the first
uh,
X number of days, where it's like it's some
yeah.
period of, because ultimately what you, as I say, if your baby's born extremely early, what you're hoping for is actually a long stay.
Hmm.
Because a long stay means there's a good chance your baby has survived and it's coming home. If it's a short stay, your baby's hasn't survived.
Hmm.
So it's kind of again, it's the duality, which is probably why I was felt like I was well designed for that world. Yeah.
It's such a complicated moment.
Hmm.
And one of the things that we ask ourselves is how do you communicate the urgency and the amount of commitment required? It's work. 8 to 12 hours a day of skin to skin care is physical, hard labor that a family needs to do together, not, but
Yeah.
each family has their own situation, single moms, parents, of all sorts, and
Yeah.
um, so imagine you were going into heart surgery, and just before you go under, the surgeon looks over you and says, "When you get up, you need to run a marathon every day, you and all of your family." And then that's it, lights out. And that's kind of how it feels like. Like you have no time to process the situation, and then you have this. So we ask ourselves, how can we work with parents in such a way that
Mm.
just one step at a time. We
Yeah.
don't want to overwhelm anyone. Let's get you in a shift right now. We'll
Yeah.
talk about, the upcoming 24 hours and that what we hope to convey, the take home message is you're the the best place for your baby is with you. You're not a guest, you're not a visitor, you're not a side staff person.
Right.
You are your baby's parent, and
Yeah.
you are a good parent. You're not a bad parent, and the best place for your baby is with you on your chest, if possible. But that's still a lot. That's a lot to digest.
Well, and like you said, your comparison, it's a marathon, not a sprint,
Yeah.
and this is just, and we're planning on a marathon. We're planning on a lot of training, want you to be ready for it when you take your baby home, really kind of creating that vision for those
That's
parents. Yeah,
That's such an insightful way of looking. That's the first time I've heard someone articulate it that way. Makes sense, of course. I mean, it's true,
yeah,
um, but it's counterintuitive
yeah,
because um,
yeah. Well, it's really been a pleasure to get to know you, to learn more about the journey of the Skincubator so far. You obviously got it's a marathon as well.
it's
So
very much a marathon indeed.
yeah. So I'm really looking forward to continue to track your progress and looking forward to sharing our conversation with our community and
Wow.
looking to see if perhaps there's ways that we can be of help for you in the future as well.
Well, I would love that. I mean, I've been following just from the sidelines your work at the Graham Foundation, and I've always felt that it's just incredible work and so important. Like I told you before the podcast, I mean, you moved me very much. All of the NICU parents move me,
Yeah.
and each story is so unique, and you're really bringing something so special to the world and so healing. So hopefully, we also can. Spread your voice and bring it to new places. And I'm looking forward to this to this
Great.
collaboration.
Thanks again.
Thank you so much.